Hello. Today we are talking about something really special. It's the decision at Madras High Court that happened, and we have somebody with us who has worked with that. Hello.
Hi,
Hi.
how are you?
Welcome to our live.
Thank
I'm
you.
so
Glad to be
happy
here.
to. I'm so happy to see you. And today's topic is so important. So, for the people who don't know what this is about or want to know more, um, Dr. Ramakrishnan is a public health professional who works in strengthening and expanding the healthcare, legal, and social services for the LGBTQI plus community. And they try to work to be inclusive for the queer people, and he is affiliated with the NGO Sathi and is the president for the same. And he's also a volunteer in Orinam Collective, and they are doing some wonderful job. And one of the most wonderful thing that happened was the Madras High Court ruling, which talked about how people can be LGBTQ friendly. The professionals need to, you know, not do heteronormative things which were like conversion therapy, and people can now live with their partners. So it's quite a lot of things which happen. So I think for you, sir, my first question is, firstly, I'm so grateful for you to be here. And my first question is, can you tell us the journey of how Orinam and Sathi began?
Yeah, thank you very much, Shivli. This is a great forum, and I'm so glad you're hosting this. Thank you very much. So I'll speak a little bit about both organizations. Sati, the organization with which I work, is a registered nonprofit, which started initially as a collective in 2000, and then they registered in the year 2002. We are basically staffed by professionals working in healthcare, in media, in research, in public health, etc. And we right now working across the country on projects relating to, sorry, not just LGBTIQ health, but a bunch of communities that are marginalized on account of gender, sexuality, HIV status, TB, etc. So to give you some examples, we work with tuberculosis in children. We work with tuberculosis in the transgender community. We work, a large part of our programs is preventing mother to child transmission of HIV. So we work around the country in partnership with the government on this. And we also work in partnership with local communities in order to advocate jointly for access to rights and access to services. So now I can switch over to Odinum, which is an informal collective started by the LGBTIQ community in the year 2003. And this was before I joined it. I joined it about a year later. And it was basically something that grew out of the few online spaces that existed at that point of time, which was mostly, Yahoo chat rooms. And then people in Chennai wanted an offline space, and that's how the group grew. And it's been around for 17, 18 years. It's an all volunteer group. And there have
Yeah,
been people who come, who are joined while students, and then they graduate and move off to another city. But there's always people coming in. And
yeah,
we have also very much been part of the community spaces. We've been involved in organizing Pride in Chennai since 2009. We
wow.
collaborate with other NGOs to do training programs. So we've worked with healthcare professionals, with teachers, with lawyers, with judges, etc., etc. So it's been a long journey, but it's one of the groups that has been around for a fairly long amount of time in
Yeah,
India.
yeah. And that is so amazing because starting the Pride event in 2009 is like way ahead of time, because I think only now people are understanding about having Pride events. So it's wonderful to have that safe space, and the work that you're doing. So let me ask you this. So when you, like I was saying, it seems like quite ahead of time. So when you started out, what was the response that you get, that you used to get from the public?
Okay. Again, I'm going to do a two-part answer. In terms of the NGO that I work with, Sati, when we started out, we had a focus particularly on healthcare. So our
Yeah.
interactions with healthcare providers, mostly doctors and nurses and counselors, was on how to provide inclusive health services to a variety of marginalized populations, including the LGBT population, but also communities living with HIV. So it did not so much catch the eye of the public because it was in the
Mm.
very kind of narrow professional domain of healthcare. As a community group, and now again I'm shifting gears, when Orinum started, it started off as a safe space for the community. There was not a whole lot in terms of social media. This was I think before, much before Facebook and certainly before Insta and such media. So mostly word got out about the collective, the Orinum collective, through word of mouth. And
Mm.
occasionally there were public programs which were written about in the newspaper, like the Hindu or the Times of India,
Yeah.
through which a lot of people got to hear about and reach out. So
Mm.
I think that there was not a whole lot of community interaction with the public as a whole. But as the number of individuals who joined the group and started volunteering increased, we started getting requests from people who are dealing with crises. For example, lack of acceptance at home, sometimes family violence, and they
Mm.
wanted both. They wanted like a queer, affirming mental health professional to which they could
Yeah.
go and they could refer their parents, and so on. So over the years, the request for help and support has grown quite a bit. A lot of individuals in the Orinum Collective are also trained as peer counselors, and we do a lot of bi-directional referrals. So professional mental health providers refer their clients to a community group like Orinum, and we also refer
Yeah.
people who need professional help to the psychiatrists and clinical psychologists and so on.
Yeah.
Over the
And that's
years, with
good.
events like Pride, the awareness and the visibility has grown quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It would be because I think one of the first conversations I had with you, we were talking about how even with shift density, we get quite a lot of people who are queer coming to us and asking about queer affirmative psychologists and doctors. And even if you are not queer, even having professionals who are sex positive and non-judgmental, that is such a huge lack, especially in
Mhm.
tinier towns of India as compared to, well, let's say Chennai, you
Metro.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's very important. And even with, like you're saying, even though that there are like quite a lot of good psychologists doing great job, which I would say for all the psychologists who are in shift density, they do such a great job in working. But then again, having a community space for trans people, for queer people, is so important for them to understand and work with them. So, I think that's very helpful that you shared with us. So, if we can compare when you started and now what it is, so what's the difference and how's the response now?
The response from the community or the
Yeah,
response from the public?
I think both would be
Oh,
quite nice
okay.
to know.
Okay. So I think over the years, a lot of people have heard about community groups, and in Chennai, there are nearly 8 to 10 community groups. Some work specifically with the trans community, some work specifically in the area of social service, in the area of crisis support, etc. And also, most of these groups now have an online presence on Facebook and Insta and websites. So we are seeing a lot more people reaching out for help. In 2009, you had the Delhi High Court verdict, which was positive, but then the Supreme Court struck it down in 2013. And then
Yeah.
in 2018, when the Navtej Johar verdict of the Supreme Court was delivered, a lot of young people kind of used that point of time to come out to family members or started reaching out for support spaces for themselves. So I think we've seen a huge spike in inquiries, asks for help, etc. since 2018. So I mean, there have been these landmark events which are often accompanied by a spurt in interest and awareness from communities as well as from the public.
Yeah, definitely. And I think similar to what you were saying, I have also seen with my professional background quite a lot of things. I think that's the thing, right? People wait for the law to change, then they work on themselves, maybe, unless and until there is something which is like legally there to support them or to at least justify something, so it becomes very helpful, the legal system. So, could you tell us a little bit about your community's journey with the recent case with the Madras High Court? I know you all were connected and you all were collaborating and working, so we would love to know about that.
Yeah, thank you. So the couple that filed the case, right, in the Madras High Court, two women from a town called Madurai, had initially reached out to community groups saying they wanted to escape from their hometown and they needed a safe place to stay. So initially they were in touch with community groups, particularly a group called Nirangal, which was trying to help them find a space to stay. Okay, but what happened in parallel is the parents discovered that they had moved away from their city, alerted the local police, and they began tracking the phone numbers of these women, through which the local police in Madurai got to find out about, find the whereabouts of the couple, track them in Chennai, connected with all the people they had been speaking with, and actually got a hold of and began harassing the community activists. One of them was beaten up. The other person was taken to the police station and, threatened with, the police would say, we have all these recordings of phone calls of you, a man, speaking with these young women. So how do we know you're not trying to traffic them into sex work? And we are going to charge you with that. So this was a huge stress for the community. Fortunately, the women managed to also find a lawyer who helped them find file the case. So after the case was filed, and this is public knowledge, the judge decided that he needed to inquire into the subject a little more. He asked for a professional, mental health professional who was queer affirmative to speak to the women, also to speak to the parents. And then he himself decided that it would be beneficial for him to learn about the psychological aspects of what happens, with queer people and queer couples, where they have to battle all odds in terms of society and family, etc. So he himself underwent what he calls a psycho-educational session.
Yeah.
So the community was involved in the crisis response. There was another NGO with which groups like Orinam are in touch, called PCVC, which runs a domestic violence shelter. And they are very inclusive, and they have provided safe spaces for many queer women and trans people. And so through these networks, right, the two women who had filed the case also managed to find a safe space to stay. And the group of people in the city who had been working on crises in general, and in this case in particular, suggested through the psychologist that it might be beneficial for the judge, for Justice Anand Venkatesh, to also interact with community members and also parents of community members who had actually accepted their children. And he readily agreed. There was a conversation we had with him in May, and then a conversation about a week before the judgment, where he got to meet Dr. Trinetra and her mom, Haima Haldar. He got to meet a few other people from PCVC, from Orinam, from Sati, etc. And he got to learn that the problem faced by LGBTIQ communities is not just restricted to violence when people are in a relationship, but it could include harassment in school. It could include difficulties in finding gainful employment, or being forced to drop out of educational institutions or workplaces because of harassment and violence. So if you take the entire life course of individuals from childhood to adulthood, there are a lot of challenges. And within the community, those who are most visible, like gender non-conforming children, transgender adults, bear the brunt of a lot of this harassment and violence. Also, the judge was initially very much in favor of having, the NGO community be the primary source of support for LGBTI community members. We tried to explain to him that that does sound like a good idea. However, NGOs, by their very nature, are restricted to a few towns or a few cities. They don't have the coverage that the government has. So if someone's in a metro city, they might be able to find an NGO which is supportive. They might be able to find a lawyer who's supportive, or even a counselor who's supportive. But if you go off to smaller towns or villages or other parts of the country, there virtually is no such support system. So in addition to involving NGOs, it would be good to involve the government and to sensitize the government on these LGBTIQ issues. Because even though we've had this amazing verdict in 2018 and this current verdict in 2021, the other arms of the government, or if you look at the police, the different rungs of the police structure, people are either not aware or they don't think it's relevant to them. So this kind of awareness is what made him, also understanding is what made him in his orders declare that all the different departments and concerned ministries should also be made aware of the community. So the LGBTIQ community, and I can't take credit for it myself, we were working together as a group, we're all involved in this kind of awareness generation, which really helped him to craft a really beautiful verdict or set of orders.
Yeah. And congratulations for you and your community for doing that. I think it just, there are, like, if you look at the spectrum, there are people who are like really ignorant, who make all of these judgmental, remarks. And then there are people who are really working hard on a daily basis to, be a very supportive ally and do such great jobs. We are getting a question from the audience. They are saying this is such a great initiative. My question is, how can we heteronormative people, I think they meant heterosexual people, be better and more meaningful allies to the queer community beyond just the token efforts?
Okay. Actually, I'm glad we're talking about heterosexual versus heteronormative, because heterosexual is just the people being heterosexually oriented, but one can be heterosexual without insisting that it is the only right way to be. So a lot of the allies who might be heterosexual are not necessarily heteronormative or heterosexist in their outlook, where they recognize there is a plurality of lives, of desires, of identities, and affirm this diversity. So I think if heterosexual people can learn not to be heteronormative, but actually try to view the world through the lens of diverse genders and sexualities, that would be a very critical and essential step, and everything else can follow from that. And beyond that, depending on where people are professionally, or, they might be a friend, they might be a family member, they might be a mental health expert like yourself and other folks at Shiv Density. They might be people in the medical profession. So depending on where and how they can contribute, there's tons of work to be done, I assure you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you said was so profound. And I was thinking this could be like a quote in a t-shirt that people can wear. I'm heterosexual, not heteronormative. And I think that is the base of it, right? We need to work from there, to understand and unlearn from there, and then go forward as an ally. So, okay, I think we have to also wrap up in some time. So I will ask you one last question, which is, what can we include in a curriculum where, if we are to, inspire the current generation? Because now I think people are getting more and more aware of there being more than one sexual identity. There are being more than one narrative, to anything. So how can we include in a curriculum for children, for students, which is like a queer friendly curriculum in schools or in colleges? Like, how do we do that?
Wonderful question. And I think that this can be very well done in an age appropriate way. So for example, in maybe 8th standard, you have biology textbooks that talk about the sexual and reproductive system.
Excellent.
Very often the teachers skip this subject and say,
Yeah.
just study on your own.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are places where, for example, one can talk about a wide range of conditions beyond binary male and binary female in terms of the intersex spectrum. And then when there are chapters that talk about adolescence and puberty and primary and secondary sex characteristics, they can
Mm.
actually talk about, ways of being and desires other than heterosexual. They can talk about
Mm.
gender identities beyond man and woman. So they can talk
Yeah.
about trans masculinity, trans femininity. In social sciences, in fact, we've done some of this work at Sati with an education NGO called Nirantar in Delhi and with a few community organizations in Kerala, Gujarat, and Tamil Nadu, where we have looked at textbooks in social and natural sciences, shown how the entire worldview presented is very heteronormative. Any image of family is just father and mother, father sitting cross-legged, reading the newspaper, the boy is playing cricket, the girl is playing dolls, the mother is cooking or giving coffee to the husband. So all of this we really have to interrogate. So we have to look beyond just LGBTIQ as a niche subject. We have to question the broader gender norms of
Binary.
man and
Yeah.
woman, and that kind of the power inequalities that are very much built into the assumptions of that the people who contribute to these textbooks are, and try to see if you can add more content to the textbooks, or if we can actually include additional exercises where you can talk about diverse identities. One way schools have done this is also invite people from the community to speak, and that's also very powerful. Also, in educational institutions where we have mental health professionals that are queer affirming, I think that would be a really great value add.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think for us, when we were studying, and, for us, it was such a sad thing that nobody really teaches about this, even in the master psychology level, even till now. Only in the past year or maybe 2 years that, I can even see counselors talking about being queer or being queer affirming as a very important thing in like psychotherapy. Otherwise it was always in the past that we have been taught sexual history was only about looking at people's, like, are they menstruating, when was their first period, and that's all about sexual health. And that is when like that's something that I was given as a student. And now that I'm looking at my juniors and super juniors and everybody going, they are learning more and more, or if not being taught in school, in colleges, they are like really asking from other professionals, from other people. So I think slowly I can see that there is a slow growth in and I can see the queer community slowly making their own space in the streamline, if we can say, which is very, very helpful. Even for the matter of fact of, like, there being some kind of representation. I wouldn't say always amazing representation or always the best representation, but at least I'm happy for the fact that now queer people in the movies or queer people in mainstream cinema are not just the side people, who are like there for comical relief, and they are actually
Right.
being talked about, even if it's not like fully correct, but at least they are being talked about, and that is
Right.
growth
Right. Mhm.
for us.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, as someone posted in the chat, there is a lot of tokenism where
yeah,
people think that it's the in thing to do or it's the fashionable thing to do to show that you're cool, and we definitely have to move beyond that. There are plenty of online resources where how one can be more involved in a meaningful way. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I recently saw, because it was Pride Month, I recently saw one of the most um, big brands of cosmetics in India. They were just like, get your Pride makeup look, get your Pride makeup for this much. And I was just like, how is that relevant? Okay, fine, you're selling makeup, but is it really
Yeah,
relevant? You know,
right, right.
it's
Yeah,
not a
there was a
pride look.
pharmacy ad. There was a pharmacy ad peddling multivitamins, and they showed a man giving a multivitamin capsule to another man, and it was all about pride and how we are so inclusive. So yeah, this can be taken to ridiculous levels, as you pointed out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of sad that people use the Pride Month, and that's like the only month that they talk about. But I think for us, being in the field, it's more like a 24 into 7 kind of a job where you are working towards the betterment. So, yeah. Okay, then thank you so much, sir, for coming in and sharing your perspectives and the work you're doing. It's really, really very inspirational. And I will definitely look forward to working more with you. How was your experience being in the live?
I think this is the very first time I've been on Insta Live, so
Yeah.
I was still trying to figure things out, but it worked. And yeah,
Yeah.
it was a good session, and thank you so much for hosting
Yes.
it, and looking forward to more such sessions.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you to the audience for listening to us. And let's hope that this is not the end of the Pride Month and like, we just like start with the next in thing.
And I'm also very glad to know that you are working out of Chhattisgarh, because I think there is a lot of need for professional mental health providers in those parts of the country, and we also get a lot of calls from there. So we'd be delighted to make referrals if you can send us a list of queer affirming
Yes,
practitioners who
yes.
are part of your network.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely. And I would like that's the thing, right? For me, this was I don't know if it is a thing for you in Tamil because I don't know Tamil, but in Hindi there is no word for like apart from the two genders, there is no word for addressing the like the trans people or something. So I think we need to start as basic as finding a queer affirming
yeah,
language to queers
right.
affirming people. It's a long road for us.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. In fact,
is
the
that
I
in
just have
Tamil?
to interrupt right now for a second. The when the Trans Act and rules came out,
Mm-hmm.
they had a Hindi version, and the word they used for transgender is ubhayalingi, which is completely wrong. Ubhayalingi means intersex; it does not mean transgender. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. There's a lot of
Mm.
misperceptions, and this also translates into wrong terminology. So finding acceptable, accurate terminology is a huge priority. People do
Yeah.
use terms like samlangik and so on, for
Sometimes it's
same-sex attraction.
homosexual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But
Dvilangik, etc. But sometimes we may just have to transliterate, like transgender. We could write it out in Devanagari. So
yeah.
yeah, because
Yeah.
terms like Hijra and Kinnar do not represent the entire transgender community, trans men, non-binary, etc. So till we
Yeah.
have acceptable words, maybe we should just transliterate. Yeah,
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 yeah. I think that's the way to go forward. And I definitely have high hopes for having something like by the time I am turning like some 60, 70, I'm hoping that there is some term by that time with continuous efforts from all of us. So, with that thought, let's wind up. And thank you so much, sir. Thank you for all the comments from the audience, and we look forward to working with you more. Yeah. Okay.
bye.
Bye.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.